Welcome back to the People's Basics, where we come once again to celebrate our movement around the universal basics of income, services, and rights. And today we're doing another Commoner's Corner segment where we talk to you, the members of the community, about what your top issues are, what you think the basic role of government is to its people, and how we can strategically organize to accomplish those goals. Today with us on the program, we're talking to activist Geoff Campbell. He is a prominent activist down in Florida, helping organize electorally as well as around the issue of Medicare for all. So with that being said, let's bring Geoff onto the program today. Geoff, welcome to the People's Basics.
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be able to have you on the program. Geoff, I really wanted to talk to you because I find yourself as a major advocate within the progressive space, primarily around the issue of Medicare for all, and also in a very important state, Florida, a very purple area that I think we can use some perspective on how we can do better there, reaching people and spreading the cause. But before I do that, I'd love for you to introduce yourself a little bit better to the audience. Could you let the people out there know what you do and how you politically identify? I called you a progressive, but I'd love to hear how you identify yourself.
So my name's Geoff Campbell. I guess you would consider it a progressive, a leftist. I guess those words both would fit. But I don't really care about titles or names like that because it's never going to fit perfectly in any of these boxes.
Yeah.
So, and I often find that people try too hard to make people fit into certain boxes. So, but I guess I would definitely fall into the left. I was the chair of the People's Progressive Caucus of Miami-Dade for 2 years through 2020. I've been a Bernie volunteer for both campaigns. I volunteered, traveled the country to help get the word out about Bernie, and then just all types of other advocacy, either whether it's around Medicare for all or trying to stop people from privatizing water systems down here in Miami, or whether it's just supporting certain local candidates. Been pretty involved since around 2016. And then I also just tweet my opinions, go on Twitter and just let it go out there. So there's also that little bit of an avenue. I don't necessarily call that activism like some people do.
A lot of people do define that wrongfully so. But, Geoff, I wanted to ask you, obviously you wear many hats and you supported Bernie Sanders. But I wanted to hear, in your opinion, obviously Medicare for all is some level of taking care of the people by government. And obviously you just mentioned you didn't want the privatization of water. And so clearly you see that there is an active role for government to play in taking care of its citizens. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what you define as that responsibility of government to its people?
Well, I guess I would say that the government should protect its people. The government should help people with whether it's education or healthcare. So I think that the government should be the role of the government should be bettering society around us. So, when I look at it, they should be providing us with healthcare for every human. We're paying, if you look at what we pay in taxes, most of our taxes go to military. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but what is it, like 70% of our taxes go to the military. So if we were just moving our, instead of just only about protecting, since we've got the largest military, funding of any other country by far, if we were just to be knocking back protect that type of protection and protecting people with, whether it's medicine, education, affordable housing, those types of things are another way that I consider you would be protecting your citizens.
Yeah, I generally align with that, as well as the People's Basic, that security is a key goal. And to just caveat that, the statistic that you provided, that is of discretionary spending. So we have some automatic spending items like Social Security and Medicare, but of discretionary spending, you're right, 70% goes to the military. And you're right, we have these budgetary prioritizations that we need to be had. And so the first one we mentioned was Medicare for all. That's been a big issue that you advocate for. And so I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what makes this such a priority issue? Before we go into all the details about it, what drew you to healthcare being one of the issues you really wanted to hyper focus on?
I think it was basically, many people might not know this, but I honestly didn't even really know about Medicare for All or the movement until Bernie's campaign in 2016. And when I, heard his plea and the reasons for why, it really hit me, mostly because I know people in my real life that got cancer, and it basically took out their entire life savings. Some people that I know that got cancer at a really young age, and it like basically even prevented them, from building their life up, because they had to just, not only were they going through all these treatments, but the bills that are involved in all that as well can really, prevent you from living a successful life. So just seeing, real people, and just knowing that their entire life can be derailed just because of medical bills, it really opened my eyes. And I just wanted to, I just believe for real that no person should lose everything they have just because they get sick. So Bernie really spelled that out well for me, and it really hit me that, like, without your health, because I've even gotten sick in my life where, if you're sick, you literally, nothing else matters. You can't really do any of the other basics. You can't work some of the times. Even if you are working, maybe your performance won't be as well as it was before. So yeah, medicine, I mean, it's right there with, I mean, it may be even more important than housing. It's like right there close with like the things that you need to survive in this world. So, there's the other thing that really struck me is that all these other major countries all over the world are providing some form of guaranteed health care. And America, I grew up, with this American exceptionalism. We're the greatest country in the world. Apple pie, Superman, we're amazing. Every other country is, not as great as America. Meanwhile, they're all providing their citizens with healthcare. While here in America, the most amazing, quote unquote, country in the world, we don't do that. So those type of things really struck me as shocking. And I wanted to make sure that more people thought about this. Because I think the other thing that goes hand in hand is that, if more people thought about it, they'd probably be on board with us. So not enough people really think about the issue and think about what the rest of the world does for its citizens. So yes, that's what really drew me towards Medicare for All.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll admit myself, I only really started to gravitate towards the issue from Bernie Sanders as well. And I think a couple of those key points really resonated with me as well. Bankruptcy is predominantly due to healthcare costs.
Correct.
66.5% of bankruptcy is healthcare cost related. That doesn't make sense to me, that we know that this is a huge driver of medical bankruptcy costs. And we're just like, yeah, you got to stick with the system, man. That's clearly working.
Right.
And then on top of that, you're right. All these other developed nations have some level of a universal healthcare system. 32 nations in total. It can vary, obviously, between a single payer model and a multi-payer model, but a universal system. And right now, America only ranks 37th in the world, according to the WHO, in terms of healthcare efficacy. So I totally agree with you. But I think the point that resonated with me most is that you shouldn't just lose everything when this happens and you can't work. And it makes me think, when you get sick, you just made the point, it's really hard to work. Well, how are you going to support your care if so much of the coverage is dependent on your work status and you can't work because you're sick? That doesn't make sense to me, to have those two things be connected.
Exactly.
So I have to wonder, like, what do you think, when you've been kind of advocating, what are some of the biggest barriers to this cause? Like, obviously, we could talk about money in politics, but I think even on the issue itself, there is clearly this still disparity of information on it, where people don't truly understand what Medicare for All means, according to polls. So could you just define for people, when you support Medicare for All, what does that mean to you?
Well, for one, I will say really quickly about these polls. I think the issue is that a lot of these polls just ask people, do you think healthcare is a right? And then most people are going to say yes. But then when you bring up, losing your private, everyone loses private insurance and all the other like parts of it, is when you might see people kind of recoil a little bit. I've talked to doctors. I've talked to, just regular citizens like you or I. I've talked to politicians. I mean, for me, mostly all the doctors I've spoken to have said that they actually are for it. And it may even be for selfish reasons because they know that their bills are going to get paid. I mean,
Yeah.
the government's not going to hold out the bill on them, so they actually are on board for it. Emergency doctors, emergency room doctors, I think, are a little concerned that there's going to be like a rush on the emergency room, which because people that before were not coming because they're worried about insurance and all these other things may not go to an emergency room, and now there's going to be this flush. But I think that that can be balanced out with time. Like maybe right in the beginning, there's going to be that little issue. So yeah, like
I mean, I'd also imagine in that situation where like our technical universal healthcare system right now is go to the emergency room. Yeah, you'll go into debt, but like they'll treat you.
But go right.
And so now instead, if you're covered, maybe you go to the more practical one, and maybe
Correct.
you do it ahead of time before things become emergencies.
Yes, exactly. Those are amazing points right there. People would not be rushing at an emergency. They would be preventative. There'd be preventative medicine going on, which is another reason why we need Medicare for all. But what I see is I definitely see why people are concerned about losing insurance, because some people are already locked in. They don't have the issue. Either it comes with their work or from past service they've done or whatever the case may be. They're happy with their that they have it. And then hearing that no matter what, their choice is gone kind of does stir people and kind of like shakes the waters there a little bit. But I mean, the majority of people throughout the country, we have more coverage, obviously, through Medicare for all. And so yeah, the biggest thing is like getting through another big. Sorry, I'm like kind of all over the place because my mind runs on this, but basically like a major issue we have is getting the Senate. Like we got to talk to our senators, and right now the Senate is like. So I was working to like convince Congress people, and we were getting a lot of good feedback. We were getting a bunch of cosigns, but the issue is that like the senators, like as it is right now, they will not, like for instance, Florida, where I was trying to work, there's literally zero chance that Marco Rubio or Rick Scott or like there's not even a reason to try to call them.
Forget about the Republicans for a moment. We're struggling with Democrats right now.
Well,
we only got 15 co-sponsors on Medicare for all in the Senate at the moment.
Correct.
So we got some work to do, even at 50-50. And so, you made the point before about some of like the hesitancy points that come up. For myself, the big focus is making sure that we have a universal system that is free at the point of coverage. That way, no one is being not without coverage. That way, we are reducing the cost. But I personally, and I'd love to hear how you feel, I think sometimes the left gets a little bit too stuck on the single payer part of the abolishing of insurance part. I think the goal should be to provide free healthcare to everyone. And I think if you offer basically a free, you could call it a public option with an automatic enrollment, but like if you offer a free option, are people not going to switch? Like I get the public option plans like Joe Biden proposed, Pete Buttigieg proposed, where you have like these buy-ins that actually prevent you from reaching universal coverage being bad and trying to do all these ACA subsidies to cover for that. It overcomplicates the system. But I do wonder if we eliminate a lot of those like counter arguments, if we did basically Medicare for all, except you remove the duplicative coverage clause. How do you feel about that notion?
I mean, I would think that maybe you do it in steps. Like, you go there, and then once you've got that working, you make the next step, especially if that's where people want to go. So, like, again, what I would say with the problem with the left is that, like, we get into, especially Twitter left, there's like these bubbles where people are trying to like outdo the other one and try to out-left each other and try to like stand on these ceremonies. So, like, if you like say anything that's like you aren't for exactly the Medicare for all that this person wants, then out of nowhere you're canceled and you're a shill and you're working for the for the establishment.
And it's not like the goal changed. It's like we still want universal coverage. We still want it to be free. It's like, okay, let's remove the one thing that they're using against us. Let's get this done. And then let's work over time as we've gotten more people into the system. At least that's how I think about that.
And I would honestly, I agree with you on that. Like, I'm not like this person that in my mind isn't like, if you don't do it exactly this way, that's it, it's over, and we're not doing any of it. Like, I agree. Like, we should be making sure we are lowering the cost or making it free just as we're going. Like, just keep moving towards universal coverage, free coverage, and like if it takes a few steps, I'm not going to like throw the baby out with the bathwater type of mentality, which I see a lot of knee-jerk reactions from the left going on, which I also, we don't have to go into it, but I think is being spurred by people that just want the left divided anyway.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that begs the question of like, where should organizing focus be? Because I feel like we feel kind of close because we have public sentiment relatively on our side, but we've talked about how we don't have all these endorsements in place. What do you see as like the tactical approach to move ourselves forward? Is it continuing to just target these House and Senate people and flipping them? What are you thinking on that?
I think it's that, and it's a bunch of things. I think just, teaching people in the community, whether it's like workshops or drives. Like, for instance, like 2 years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago, a team of activists and we went door to door just informing the neighborhood about Medicare for all. Like, we weren't doing it for Bernie Sanders or for a candidate or because we were necessarily even getting this type, it passed in the state of Florida, but we just went out. We went door to door just to ask people what they think, to tell them what it stands for. And we had a lot of positive reactions, especially like at the door. We met some people we met, like we were talking about before, that had their mother had cancer and they lost everything. They their entire savings is gone. If not for their wife having a second job, they would have lost everything. Stories like this. So I think it's like doing that. Like, if we got more people going, like on a weekend when like there's not campaigns going on, if we got them going door to door talking about Medicare for all in the community, so that it's more, it's just more understood, more known. Obviously, it would help, like with major candidates, like when Bernie ran, even though he lost, like getting that message out there as someone who's running for the president of the United States really helps the cause overall. AOC. Right now, she's a major figure that a lot of young people listen to. Her just speaking about it, doing education on it, like, it's huge, huge. So like, people were mad she didn't force a vote. Okay, she's got such a huge voice that she's going to be able to get people onto our side. If she's screaming and cursing Nancy Pelosi and looking like a maniac, you're not going to be gaining support from people like Warren supporters or Julian Castro supporters or whoever, Cory Booker supporters. I mean, you can't just be in this one world where you only want to talk to your friends and you only want to talk to the people who agree with everything you say. AOC, the squad, whoever, they have to go reach out to other people that aren't as left as they are, and it doesn't make them frauds or establishment or whoever to warm up to more establishment or more centrist type of Democrats. We need them to come our way. We need them to see, and we need their constituents also to understand why this is an important cause and them to vote and want to vote for those things. So, I think it's just about, maintaining unity. We got to maintain unity, not let people come in and try to tell us that, certain people are frauds and sellouts just because they didn't do things exactly how we wanted them. You'll know whether someone's a sellout or not. Bernie Sanders, who's been doing it for 50 years, is not going to overnight sell out to the establishment, for any reason. He's got no reason to do that. And I honestly trust the squad, AOC, Cory Bush, Ilhan Omar, all of them, to have our back on this and to be great people to be able to get the word out and doing education on it. So we know, it sucks that we can't have Medicare for all overnight. It sucks because we are living during a pandemic right now, and a worldwide pandemic. And I know people make the argument, "Oh, we're living in a worldwide pandemic. How dare they not pass Medicare for all? Everyone's going to take to the streets and demand it if they force a vote." Okay, nobody in the regular world, I know that sounds ideal, but they're not. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
They're not ready to take to the streets, because of a forced vote on a Congress floor that no one will really hear about except on C-SPAN. And then also, not only that, then they'll just be twisted in the mainstream media that it failed and it was a horrible cause. I mean, I still can't believe that people thought force the vote was going to make Medicare for all happen. But
I think they kind of need a little historical context. One of the problems I always worry about with the left is that we are very young, and that comes with us not necessarily having all of the experience of past legislative battles. For instance, in the 90s, we had a battle for single-payer healthcare under the Clintons. This is the whole Hillary Clinton failed at getting us healthcare debate. The Bernie Sanders was standing right behind her.
Yeah,
we didn't do well there, and we were out of not being able to advocate for this issue for basically 15 years. It went so poorly that all the politicians ran scared from the issue, basically. And so
Right.
you're right that it's not a guarantee that the people are just suddenly going to rally behind because it's popular, because, well, then there's also alternative, potentially popular solutions too. Like, we still have to contend with the public option is relatively popular at the moment too. So
Correct.
this notion of just forcing these people could backfire. But I think the point you also made before I wanted to touch on that is really important. That level of just advocating on an issue basis, non-electorally, I think is really important. Because I think a lot of people get turned off when you're trying to sell them one person. It's like, oh, do I like this specific individual? What am I being sold on? Is that one individual going to sell out? When it's a policy, it's a little harder for those like defensive features to come up.
Correct.
And furthermore, and more importantly, we need to be doing more face-to-face time than every 2 years. It needs to be regularly. So it doesn't just show that we're coming there to sell you. We're here in the community caring about your issues, talking to you, whether there's an election cycle or not. And so I think that's a big thing that I certainly agree with you that we should be pushing more, is just specific issue advocacy canvassing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Geoff, one more question that I had for you. You started to mention this with like kind of the coalition and AOC needing to pull potentially some punches against some of the more centrist Democrats. Obviously the left had two primary chances where we got like 41% for Bernie in 2016. And then I think it was like 35% in 2020. Obviously we have some growth to go. And so I'd love to ask you, where do you see that target coalition of expanding the left being? Is it primarily the liberals, or where do you think?
I think that you gotta, obviously there's a bunch of independents out there that we definitely could influence and bring into our fold for sure. A lot of young people that have no party affiliation. I was part of a bunch of drives for registering to vote back in this right before the last election, and a lot of the reports I got and a lot of the things I saw myself firsthand were a lot of young people were like, I don't care about it. Elections don't matter. Voting doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, I love Bernie Sanders, but voting doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we need to talk to the young people that have been turned off. So that's one part of the coalition. Obviously, the independents are part of a coalition. And then I would say, yes, we need to talk to centrist Democrats. We need to do it. Like, I know that, first of all, there's a bunch of young centrist Democrats that are more left than, the boomer generation centrists. A lot of people that supported Elizabeth Warren. I mean, obviously, I had some issues with what went down during the primary. I wasn't the hugest fan of what Elizabeth Warren did, especially when she left Bernie on that stage, didn't even shake his hand. But she was my second candidate for the most part during the election. Most of her supporters agree with Bernie supporters on almost everything. So definitely, that they're called liberals or whatever you want to call them, but they're not. They're just, social Democrats or whatever. So there's a lot of people that we could definitely reach out to. And so, doing this whole thing where they call everybody a shit lib and, crapping on centrists, I think needs to stop. I honestly there's going to be cases like K-Hive trolls and people that are like
K-Hive. Oh God, that's a whole other conversation.
But obviously I'm not saying everybody needs to be brought in the fold. I'm not saying everyone's going to want to come into the fold, but I'm saying there are centrists or people more leaning center that we can speak to that would agree on healthcare, would probably agree on a lot of environment issues. And there's no reason to be burning bridges and calling people snakes and rats and all these things. I do think that a lot of people on the left went a little too far on social media. I know I myself was guilty of that at times. It was heated. Obviously, a lot of people were all pent up from, Bernie's campaign the last time when a lot of people felt cheated, and that kind of went over into the next election, and people were hyped and ready to be on the attack. And so it's tough, but we need to let those things go. We need to do what Bernie would do, honestly. You don't see Bernie, holding these grudges, these petty little grudges, because if that happened, nothing will ever get accomplished. So let go of the petty drama. Try to have real conversations. There's going to be trolls. Ignore them, block them, do whatever you have to do in real life. Just ignore them. And just try to have real, genuine, good faith conversations with anybody. Is what I would recommend, and stop trying to label people, put people into boxes, unless you can foresee that they're, really right wingers or people that are instigators and trolls. So yeah, I'm for trying to talk to liberals, to independents, and definitely young people. If we could really hit that group and really bring them in, instead of the other idea that I've seen from people like Jimmy Dore, whoever, who want to somehow preach to right-wing militia groups, and that is not the way to go. And I can promise you, even if they agree that the establishment stinks, and yes, the establishment is horrible, they don't agree with a bunch of the other things, the more important things. So
yeah, I echo that sentiment, and I do think that you're right that we should be trying to take a more positive and uniting approach. The way I usually frame it for at least my audience is that we should be practicing a politics of attraction instead of repulsion, yes. And that either the centrists are going to work with us and we start pulling the center to the left, or we push them away and they start working with the right. They're going to choose a camp. And so right. Who do you want to interact with more? The person who's calling you a fucking shitlib, or the person who's like, let's talk these things out and I'll treat you with some level of respect? Like, I think people think about politics on the left a little bit too often purely on a policy level and a financing level, and not on like a parasocial level where, relationships is primarily how a lot of politics is done. The notion of how you gain endorsements with people is from these social relationships you've built up over time. And I think we need to take a more respectful approach because, we may have voted for different candidates in the 2020 primary. I voted for Andrew Yang personally. But I agree with you, as you just said, on most of these issues. I support having universal health care. I support having the notion that we have universal college and getting rid of the student debt that we're having. There's so many of these issues where we can have common ground, but it's like, why fight each other? We're going to still work for these same causes. And I remember so clearly, because we worked with a lot of the congressional candidates in 2020, there was so much overlap with who the Bernie supporters were supporting and who we were supporting too. It's crazy to me that we just are artificially drawing these lines and saying, you have to be completely with us on everything or we just can't even work together and you're my enemy. Like, there's obviously lines of distinction to be drawn, but I think people need to understand, of how do you grow a coalition? You got to be a little bit more tolerant.
Absolutely.
So
I would say that the Yang Gang was pretty good. I never had any bad run-ins, so on that level alone, I'm more than happy to work with you guys or anybody who, any candidate supporters from the 2020. I would be more than happy. Maybe not Bloomberg, but anybody.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. By the way, I am just kidding. I would even.
But I would even say. Oh, okay. Actually, finish your point. Sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say, even if a Bloomberg supporter wanted to get on board and could possibly support something with the environment or possibly support something with criminal justice reform, I would still even work with them. So, and there are a lot of them, especially where I live in Miami. A lot of people on Twitter forget when they start getting in these debates with me that I live in a spot that is very centrist to leaning right, and for me, and none of the politicians that are ever going to run around in my area are going to be like up to the par of the super left. It's just never going to happen. And you got to work with where you live and try to move people as far as they possibly can on left issues in the place you are. So people also have to remember their locality is extremely important.
That's true. I mean, it's a constant move of doing progress within your own area. It's just move the needle forward. And, to your point about even like the Bloomberg people, like both my parents were Bloomberg voters. I tried my best to get them, but it's like, am I going to give up on them completely? They actually align with a lot of the policy. It takes gradual work over time for them to see the issues. So I couldn't agree more. We do need to be working based on a localized level with who we have. So Geoff, I want to thank you for taking the time with us today. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share? And always, as we do with all of our guests here, do you have any questions that you want to ask?
I'll just throw one out for you. Who would you like in the 2024 2024 presidential election?
So I'm going to give the wet blanket answer first. I don't think it's going to matter. Right. I think Campbell is going to win, or Joe Biden. Who knows if he runs again? But who would I want to see run? Okay, I'm going to give you two answers. So I'm going to give you one politician and one non-politician. The non-politician I want to see run is Jon Stewart. I think that would be a really interesting election, and he could at least at a minimum expose a lot of the flaws in it and kind of bring the notion of the absurdity being exposed.
Yep.
I think that could be really interesting. And then in terms of politicians, this is probably a little too early for the person, but I do really like them. And I think they would pull a lot of the liberals that Kamala would normally get. Like Katie Porter, I think could be really interesting.
Cool.
She's definitely kind of gotten that vibe. She's definitely still kind of progressive. She's definitely more of like a Warren type. She's not like a socialist, but like she's clearly against some of the greed in big corporations. And so I think she could kind of fit the vibe of stealing Kamala's base a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not bad. I'm very interested in that Jon Stewart idea, because Trump won. He was a celebrity and people were sick of the politicians, and Jon Stewart, even though that he could still run on that type of a thing, but it has been very political. It's not bad. I mean, it's interesting.
Here's the one notion I'll give. Before he quit The Daily Show, he was considered the most trusted name in news. Like, as a comedian.
Yeah.
That's impressive. And so you have to wonder how many people would be like, okay, he wanted to step up. What's going on? Why would he do even something like that? I'm dreaming, obviously. He won't do that.
He won't do it, but it would be nice.
But it would be fun. But Geoff, I want to thank you for taking the time with us today to come onto the program. We really appreciate taking the time with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Had a lot of fun, and I hope people take some of this advice to heart.
I hope so, too. Okay. Have a great rest of your night, Geoff.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, everyone. That was Geoff Campbell. Please go check him out on social media. If you're watching here on YouTube, we have included the link to his social media profile. We want to remind you as well in our description section, come join the movement. Click the Linktree link to find all of the links to our network, the social media communities, our Discord, how you come on the show, our website. Everything is in there. So with that being said, my friends, I hope you, the universal basic people, have a great night. And as always, I hope you stay classy out there.